I know you mentioned it a few times, just the buyback principle. So people who are not familiar with this, you say this throughout the book, and I listened to the audiobooks. I heard you mention it numerous times of hiring not to grow the business, but hiring to buy back your time. Can you elaborate on that and what the difference in almost like the mindset shift is with that approach?
Yeah, the big idea that I share with people is the concept of calendar over capacity. Most people, when they hire individuals to help them in their business, contractors, team members, part-time people, full-time, it doesn't matter. When you spend dollars, labor to hire somebody, most people do it to add capacity to their business, right? I've got demand now. I need help with shipping. I need help with writing more code. I need designers because I have a design agency or a PR agency or whatever. I've got somebody that does fabrication, whatever it is. They're like, I've got a capacity problem. The challenge with that is you could hire people to add your capacity, but it actually doesn't make your life better. And if anything, it adds complexity. More people means more things you have to manage. And if you haven't bought back the lower value tasks to free up your time to go do the higher value stuff, then that's where you end up building a business that might have grown in top line revenue, but you actually make less profit because you hire out a sequence, right? In the book, I talk about this concept called the replacement ladder. And it's really the sequence of hires in the order that costs the least amount of money, dollars, to gain back the most amount of time, like freedom, to then for you as the CEO to do the activities that light you up, that make you the most money. And if you keep making your trades using the buyback principle through that lens, then it's almost impossible for you to grow the business and not enjoy the process, because as you do it, you're using your calendar as the map, as the auditing place, right? And I teach time and energy audits. This week, there's one meeting in my calendar that's orange, that's not red, but it ain't green, that I now have to find a way to get out of to either hire somebody or delegate it or cancel it. Honestly, sometimes we just got to delete. And the moment I do that, now my whole week is exciting. There's no aspect of my week where I'm like doing something that I want to absolutely, truly enjoy and love. And that's just a really powerful place to get to. So I just really want to teach people the philosophy of we don't hire people to grow our businesses. We hire people to buy back our time. If we do the second, we get the first. But if we do the first, we don't always get the second.
And I'm sure there's many people who are going to be listening to this podcast that like the idea of this, but they will say they struggle with delegation, or they fear that they won't find somebody they can delegate to that can do it as well as they can. I know in the book you talk about the fact that 80% done by someone else is 100% freaking awesome, which I agree with. How do you help people get over the idea that you do have to delegate if you want to be able to buy back your time, and then also the fact that it's okay if they don't do it 100% as well as you do?
Yeah, I mean, Michael, what I love about that question, and it's the crux of every entrepreneur's journey, right? I remember when I didn't have any employees and I didn't follow my logic that I learned today, and I hired a programmer because I was writing code, and I was like, well, I'm busy writing code. I need to hire another programmer. And, all of a sudden I'm really critical about this person's work, right? And they don't do it as good as me. And then I get frustrated that I have to redo the work, or that like I spent the money to pay them to do it, but it wasn't done as good as I could. And I mean, I could have just did it myself. I could have saved myself the time and the hiring and all these things. And logically, I can see where people get to like, that makes sense. But here's what everybody needs to understand is, what is the purpose of building a company, right? My gut tells me that people want to build a business so they can get to a place, ideally fairly quickly, where the business can generate revenue without them being involved in any part of the business, right? Even if you're an artist, I use a lot of examples of, authors and real artists that understand how to build a production process that creates their unique output, their craft, their giftedness, and demonstrates that to the world, but in a way that's scalable so that if you want to go on vacation, your business doesn't go to zero. I mean, my brother sells homes, and one of his customer segments are doctors. And a lot of his customers, when he's talking about, how's things, how's life, or you take a vacation, many of the doctors say to him, well, I would love to take vacation, but the challenge is not the cost to go on vacation. It's the lost revenue if I'm not doing surgery, or if I'm not doing my practice. And that's a part that I don't think people kind of use in that equation. As soon as I realize like, oh, having somebody else write code for me, somebody else being, paralegal or an assistant or whatever it is, even at 80% as good as me, is buying back 100% of an hour. That trade is amazing, right? Anytime I look out through my day and I see something, even if it wasn't done to the level I would have loved to or expected it to be done, the fact that it got done by somebody else and I didn't spend an hour, I do a lot of Ironman events and stuff. So like maintaining my bikes and like charging all the batteries and the devices and the Bluetooth, and it doesn't connect. And like just right before we started, we had a Wi-Fi problem. We're blessed to have a house manager, Betty. And I just messaged Betty and I was like, hey, can you deal with the Wi-Fi? And she knows the protocol. Boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, we're good to go. So like even just figuring out anything that you don't do that somebody else does, it's such a gift. It's such a blessing. That mind shift of gratitude is what's missing for most people. Instead of the frustration, you should be like, wow, somebody else did this and I wasn't involved in it. So I could go work on something that is more meaningful that could actually move the business forward. I think most people just don't have enough self-worth that if they actually had that time back, that they would trust themselves to do something productive with it. And that's why they're critical of other people instead of reflecting on the fact that they got the time back so they could do something that only they could do that actually moves their dream forward.
Yeah, I think sometimes people get stuck on what they're being freed up from and not so much thinking about what they're being freed up to. And on the concept of leverage, I know you mentioned that earlier. If you could briefly elaborate on the buyback rate calculation, just as like a tool for someone to determine what are the types of tasks or activities that I can delegate and how do I make financial sense of it?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. I appreciate it, Michael. The thing that I was getting hung up with every time I talked to an entrepreneurial friend is they would say to me, I can't afford it. And I'm not saying you can, because some people just don't charge enough for their time. If you're an entrepreneur and you make 50 grand a year, your options are pretty limited. So the way to fix that is create more value for the market, raise your prices. But the buyback rate essentially looks at your income. Every business has different levels of income to the owner. If you're small and it's just you, then it's 100% of that number. If you look at, your income being your salary you pay yourself plus distributions, and I would also include any discretionary expenses, because I know how people don't like to pay taxes. So you might have a lot of expenses gone through your business that are more personal. If you take that total amount of dollars, the distributions, the profit, and your pay, what you take as a salary, that's the annual, essentially, income production of your business. You take that number and you divide it by 2,000, because there's about 2,000 hours in the year. That's essentially what your current business is generating per hour that you work. My buyback rate is you divide that number by a quarter. So I know I'm doing math with people and I might lose a few, but if you think of just like 100,000 a year and you divide it by 2,000 hours, if you're making 100,000 a year, that's $12.50. That's not, and you divide that by 4, right? So 100,000 a year divided by 2,000 is 50, divide that by a quarter, because I want to get people a 4x ROI on their time. That $12.50 doesn't sound like a lot, but think of it this way. Anything you do in your life that's not working to produce revenue, that you could have paid somebody $12.50 or less, you're literally working against yourself, right? And I'm talking administrative tasks, follow-up, research, travel, having a person manage it. In the book I teach, whole chapter 6 is around how do you delegate and properly set up the infrastructure for inbox and calendar. Having somebody else own those things, Michael, when we scheduled this, I wasn't involved in any part of this conversation, right? As soon as I knew I wanted to collaborate with you, is the team set it up, we scheduled it. And today, my calendar doesn't have white space, but it doesn't mean that I'm working the whole time. The hours I work is what I work. And then in that, there's my workouts. There's, I think I have a dinner tonight. I've got some investments I'm going to go look at. And somebody else manages my time so that I can be 1,000% present with you right now, right? Or when I'm with my kids, my 2 boys, I want to be 1,000% present with them. I don't want to be thinking about follow-up emails and did I send this or did I book that? Just having the mentality of using your buyback rate to look at all the things, just write them all down. People could easily just write down everything that they do throughout their day. And I teach this time and energy audit. And then just look at is there anything on this list that I'm doing that could have paid somebody else or delegated or out-tasked? And the world we live in, some of this stuff can be outsourced to other parts of the world for $4 or $5 an hour. So you can hire full-time people dedicated to your business. We have a whole team of assistants for our executive and senior leadership teams. And I think we pay like $1,500 a month for a full-time dedicated person. And that's available to any person out there. Now, you need to learn the systems and the skills to be able to work with that person. But being able to buy back your time, using your buyback rate, and that using that forcing function to not spend more. See, most people go top heavy. I've seen people, Michael, they're like, I need to hire a COO. I read a book, got to hire a COO. And I'm like, you don't even have an assistant. Like, you don't need a COO. You need to learn how to work with an assistant, let alone a COO. And they're like, oh yeah, COO could cost you $300,000. An assistant could cost you as little as $10,000 a year full-time if you want to go international. So the buyback rate is designed to hold people to a spending labor cost so they don't get top heavy, and then work really hard to become more valuable to the market, increase your income, increase your profitability so that you can increase your buyback rate. That's literally the game that I teach people how to play, is how do you become more valuable? Here's the measurement. When you work and you build your company, make sure that number keeps going up. The more your buyback rate goes up, the more time you'll buy back, the more freedom you'll have to work on things that light you up, that make you and your business more money. It's kind of an awesome game to play.